All right, good afternoon, everyone. Fab. As you said, less than 10 minutes, so I promise I will keep this brief. As you said, I do have a day job. Day to day, I do all things BIM with BRE. I'll put this down. So I've been asked to talk about embracing innovation in architecture, and just trying to think about it, I needed some kind of base point. I was given this rough idea of talking about what would happen trying to go past level 2, the kind of new skills that need to be put part of the built environment, and this idea of how technology can help advance designs for life. To start of it, trying to look at, well, what's actually going to happen after level 2. Looking into something like Digital Built Britain, it talks about the idea of trying to create this skilled, digitally enabled workforce, and ultimately trying to share technologies across sectors and develop new markets and places. So it's very much focusing on the upskilling idea and promoting this digitation within the industry. As such, there's a real need to focus on what's actually going to happen and make sure we have the right skills and we move forward with those right capabilities. Otherwise, we could end up in a serious situation where we have an unskilled workforce. Occasionally at the moment, there's a lot of talk about CAD monkeys in the industry, and we're getting to the point now where we're introducing the BIM pansy. So there's a need to look at it and a need to focus on what skills we actually do need. As part of this, I've had a look at the concept of the T-shaped professional. The idea being, as part of the T-shape, is that the long part of the T is your specialist discipline and what you focus on. So for someone like me, that's going to be architecture and architectural technology, but as part of your role, you do delve into other areas. So from the architectural side of it, there are other roles you're involved with. You might know a little bit about the MEP side of things, a little bit about structures, but you wouldn't want to design the whole thing. In the same way that you kind of understand how things are built and installed, but I wouldn't trust myself to put a wiring system into a building. So you kind of have those skills when you go through the education system. Now, as part of introducing digitization, CAD and other technologies, it's actually started to evolve. What we're having now is that we're introducing new skills into the standard work set that we use. So a lot of architects and technologists are now starting to float more into the CAD manager role, dealing with licensing, looking at hardware tools, templates, objects, and actually controlling those kind of systems. And on the same side, on the QA and management side, starting to deal more with document controller stuff, actually looking at the information that flows in and out, the workflows and processes that are in place. So we're starting to expand in terms of what we're doing. Now, in terms of the level 2 thing and everything's been introduced as part of that, there are further skills that are currently being brought in. And because of the fact that we're dealing more with the 3D information, we're interfacing, we're collaborating more, we're getting a greater understanding of what other disciplines do. As part of this process now, I always consider electrical engineering to be very much a black art, but by having it in a 3D model and being able to see it and interact with it, you're actually starting to understand it more, because you're having to deal with how everything interfaces together in a much more visual and direct way, which means that as part of it, we're now starting to understand more about what's happening in these other roles and more about how things are being built and installed as a direct result. So as part of this process, in the same way, people are moving into other sectors completely. You'll find that a lot of architects, a lot of lead designers, as part of the process, are moving into app development. This is part of this process of creating small little plugins for some of the software tools that they use, or even implementing rule-based systems, such as integrating different rules and criteria in software like Celebri. The idea now is that they're managing how the data is going in and actually changing how some of the software is used. You'll find that a lot of young people, the millennials, Generation Y, are starting to learn computer programming as a core set of skills coming into the built industry. In the same way, there's a lot happening now with data analytics. There's a lot more data coming into play, we're getting a lot of information, and there's a need to try and do something with it. There's a lot of talk about going from outputs into outcomes, and the only way to get to those outcomes is to actually take this data and get something meaningful out of it. So this is kind of where the early adopters are heading into these amber areas, but the question is what's going to happen and where are we going to go in the future? Personally, I think it's going to sway very much in the opposite direction, and I think there's going to be a lot more focus on the social science side of it, as well as relationship management. Now, as we digitize and innovate as part of the industry, there's a lot more that computers and technology is going to be able to do for us. So to be able to try and mitigate automation as part of the process, we need to focus on those more human elements as part of it. We're getting a lot of data, we want to actually have something meaningful, so as opposed to designing a building, we want to design something that people can use efficiently. It's about understanding behavior, and as a result, we're creating an outcome as opposed to an output. In the same way, there are many disciplines involved. There's a lot of stuff we do, such as negotiation and management. So that actual human element of actually talking to people is going to become more and more important as other roles and responsibilities can be done by the machine. So effectively, as part of this process, we're looking at the kind of skills that we need for the future. Looking at some of the information out from the World Economic Forum, they've looked at the kind of skills that you need in terms of key job roles. Things like critical thinking, negotiation, and creativity are part of those top skills. And when we move into the future, they become even more important and become part of the top 5 skills people will be looking for in the future. These are much more human elements and things computers can't do very well. Effectively, we're getting to the point where, as opposed to being man versus machine, where people are fearing things are going to happen, we actually need to turn it around and work with technology and embrace the more human side of what we do. Interestingly, back in the 1850s, this came into play. It's the spin and jerry, and it came in and effectively abolished spinning threads as an industry. Through this process, there was revolt against this kind of thing, and this is kind of where the phrase Luddite came from, and this idea of a Luddite's fallacy in terms of destroying technology to try and save existing roles. Some of this and the backlash into some of the technology we're seeing now. You can go to conferences and events where people bash the quality of models, bash the quality of technology, and say that it's rubbish, we need to keep to the way we're working, as opposed to finding positive ways we can use that information and get a good human outcome out of it. So the idea is to look at how we can limit that. Using something like the BBC's How Likely You Are to Become a Robot in this automation survey, you find that someone like the chartered architectural technologist is very unlikely to be automated. I've only got a 2% chance of being replaced by a robot. So pretty good. And part of that is because these human elements are a part of the role. As a chartered architectural technologist, negotiation, critical thinking, problem solving are a core part of what we do, and they're things that a computer can't do well. Looking at those kind of skills, things that computers are really good at are manual tasks, processing lots of data, and doing repetitive work, which at times can very much feel like the role I do. But the key kind of unique selling points are the ability to empathize, have creative problem solving, social intelligence, and to be able to negotiate. These are things that a computer can't do. So if we emphasize ourselves into these kind of roles and responsibilities and allow the computer to do the bit the computer does well, we actually can kind of self-preservate ourselves while actually moving into a more human way of doing things. This means that ultimately you could look at a dual role, you could become very computer-centric, at which point things like specifications, reports, performance criteria and analytics are things you can leave the computer to do, and while the human elements, concept design, problem solving, stakeholder engagement, feedback and collaboration are very much human things that we want to do as part of our processes. So by actually focusing on these, focusing on those core skills that are trying to be achieved by 2020, we can actually do something really well and become much more involved in the process. Effectively, by choosing which skills we pick for the future, we can hope to make architects and technologists a little bit more human. And that's that.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Outstanding. You're 48 seconds under. Unbelievable. Now, but the whole thing about BIM, I suppose, I mean, do you think, is there a risk that we over-focus our discussions around BIM on the kind of the CAD, on the kind of the upfront, obvious old school kind of drawings quicker, rather than getting stuck into the whole life solutions? I mean, does more education need to be going on around that whole, what is the real power of data?
Very much so. I mean, when we first had, traditional drawing systems, those kind of rules that we had in place were very prevalent. You'd actually have certain fonts you'd have to use, certain things, certain thickness for lines. When the CADs and a lot of the technologies came in, people kind of didn't understand the systems, at which point it became much more of a wild west of processes. Some offices would have no standards at all, people would pick very different things. So now as part of this, we're actually bringing a lot of those back. So by focusing instead of the technology on how you do it, the processes and the standards in place, you end up with better outcomes and better data so you can do better things with it.
Do you think the future, as you described it, where people are becoming, embracing technical skills, does it make it more of a more attractive profession, the built environment?
I think it would, because I think the issue that we've got is that there's an issue with seeing the future plan for a lot of these things. And if we're very much rooted in technology, there's always a risk that a new technical innovation could effectively remove or force a lot of people to mitigate and go into a different role and profession, whereby these human elements will always exist because human people use buildings, react with buildings, and put things together. So by focusing on those human bits, you effectively can help keep yourself relevant as part of it.
Daniel, you're definitely only 2% robot. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel
you.
Rossiter, thank you.